Welcome to the Creators Podcast. I am Jonathan Hamill, a doctor and writer based in Paris. My guest today is Dan ARIELY. Professor ARIELY is the James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University and a founding member of the Center for Advanced Hindsight. He has been doing research on decision-making and behavioral economics for over 2 decades. He holds 2 PhDs, one in cognitive psychology, another in business administration. In his effort to share his findings with the world, Professor ARIELY has written many books, including Predictably Irrational and The Upside of Irrationality, both of which became New York Times bestsellers. He also participated in the creation of the movie Dishonesty and the card game Irrational Game. Recently, NBC released a TV series called The Irrational, which is based on Dan's book Predictably Irrational. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, Professor ARIELY found himself in the middle of a conspiration theory, which led him to study the subject of misbelief for over 2 years. The result of this research is in his new book titled Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. You can find him on Instagram at Dan ARIELY and on his website, danariely.com. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Very, very complex times, but lovely
Very
to
complex.
be here with you.
So I wanted to start maybe in an odd place, but I was wondering if you could tell us about your love of hiking, because I've seen in some of the interviews that you go sometimes on very long, 1 month long hikes, maybe without phone, without anything. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I grew up, I used to go a lot to nature and hike and so on, short hikes when I grew up. And then I was badly injured. I was in hospital for 3 years, zero hiking. And then I started working, and I became a very good workaholic. In fact, there were years where I felt that even exercise is an indulgence, that I have so much to do that it's irresponsible to take an hour and go for a run or something. And then when I turned 50, it was a combination of hiking and a lack of social connections. Yeah, I felt that I've been working nonstop without even taking a day off for years. And I contacted my friend from 7th grade, the guy that I used to go hiking with. And I said, to celebrate our 50th birthday, this was the year, why don't we go on a month-long hike? And he agreed. And it was a very special hike, but we did 2 strange things. So the first thing we did was we wrote an application, an online application that people could apply to hike with us. So we did the hike in Israel, the Israel Trail going from the north to the south, and people could apply to join us for a day. And we got lots and lots of application, over 1,000. We picked a few people.
1,000? Wow.
We picked for each day between 2 or 3 people. We kept a few days just for ourselves, but we got people from different times of in our history, people we didn't know, people that had all kinds of reasons to join us. We did 3 days with lots of people, but most of the day with very few people. And then we also had the rule for the trail. The rules were no phones from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that every day starts with everybody who came sharing an embarrassing story about themselves. And that was a really good way to start a day with open conversation, after people do that. But going back to hiking, after that, Ron and I kept on doing it with another friend, Moran. So the 3 of us spend a month a year since then, every year, hiking. COVID made it a bit more difficult, but we found a way. And there is something very interesting in walking together. because when you speak with a person across the table, there's a sense of um, time limit, and we talk about something, and it's very awkward to all of a sudden pause for a minute and
And
think.
is there also, because it's eye contact, and when you're walking, you're looking
That's
in the
right.
same direction?
That's right. There's like a sense of, okay, we're kind of in a conversation, and we can't say, let me just think for 5 minutes. But when you walk, it's basically fine to walk a little faster,
Hmm.
walk a little slower, think about something. And when you walk for a while with somebody, it's perfectly fine to go back to a topic. In a regular conversation, we start talking about something. Let's say it's not a podcast, but you and I are talking about life, and after half an hour, I say, "Oh, I want to go back to the topic we talked in the beginning and rehash it again." It just feels strange, right? There's a sense of, but when you walk for a long time, it's perfectly fine to go back and discuss a topic and say, you know what, I still want to understand what my stand is on this or that. What should I do, and so on. So these months end up being very thoughtful and deep, and so on. And the last thing I'll say about walking is that this new book, Misbelief, I wrote much of it in the Swiss Alps
Really?
in the summer. I rented a little cottage, disconnected from electricity and water. I had a little well and a little bit of solar power. But every day I woke up, I thought about what I want to work on today. And then I walked up the mountain for 2 hours. Very tough, slightly tough hike. I was certainly out of breath. But in my mind, I was trying to create what I'm going to write, the structure, the sentences, and so on. And then 2 hours later, I would get to the top of the mountain. Because my hands are not so good, I would use voice to text. I would dictate my thoughts. And I found it to be a wonderful process. Later on, I discovered there's some papers showing that people are actually more creative when they
Yes. In
walk.
the walking, yeah.
But it was also about the fact that I had 2 hours. So many times I would say, what do I want to work on today? And after half an hour, I said, okay, I got it. I know what I want to do.
So there was the time limit also.
But no, but the time. So after, let's say I have 2 hours, but after half an hour, I say, okay, I figured it out.
Hmm.
Nevertheless, I said, I still have an hour and a half. Let me keep on thinking about
Yeah.
it. And it always got better, or at least I thought it got better. So, I think that many times we come to premature ideation,
Yeah.
where we think the idea is already good, but
Yeah.
we just
And if we have some other things to do, then we just
keep on.
go look at the computer and say, oh, it's fine. I have the idea already.
That's right. That's right. So it was a wonderful way. So I think that there's value of walking, there's value of thinking and walking, there's value of talking, there's value of walking by talking side by side. There's a value talking in a difficult terrain because it gives you an excuse. In the same way that when people go on dates, I think that sometimes people go to a loud place so that it can mask awkward silences and allow for a different. I think that hiking together is really a wonderful way to go about it.
All right. Okay. So we'll get now to this book that was written in the Alps. So Misbelief, that I just finished a few days ago. So the beginning of the story takes place in the early days of COVID. So
Yeah.
you are the height of your academic career. You're advising governments on health, social issues. Can you tell us what happens next?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. It was kind of a shift from COVID. Of course, there's a virus, but there's a ton of questions about social science. What do we do with distant work and distant education? And what do we do with masks? And what do we do with furlough? How do we pay people who are unemployment? What do we do with the sense of stress? Releasing prisoners. Just the amount of
Mm.
questions were incredible. And I have two phones, and I just try to help as much as I can. I take any call and try to do as much as I can. And all of a sudden, I get an email that says, "Dan, what's wrong with you? What have changed?" And I write quickly back, "What have changed?" And I get a long list of links. One of them described how I was badly injured, burned in 70% of my body. True. How I spent almost 3 years in hospital. True. And then it describes how that got me to hate healthy people and and join the cabal, Bill Gates, and the Illuminati to kill as many healthy people as possible. Not true. And there were many other stories and links, and I mentioned the word Gates here and the word vaccination here, and so on. And I spent about a month trying to defend myself, trying to explain myself to the people who were accusing me. I talked to people on the phone. I called them up. I met some people face to face. I joined groups. I Telegram. I joined some podcasts. All kinds of things, and I basically failed miserably. I I convinced almost nobody. But when this month was over, I realized the magnitude of the problem.
Yeah,
Because we all heard about misbelief, people who believe, you name it. And it's one thing to say, okay, it happens, and it's another thing to be face to face with somebody or online, and for them to say to me something about my life,
yeah,
and I say,
exactly.
no, that's not true.
S
And they say, yes, it is true. And
yeah, yeah.
it's a very eerie process. To
So, yeah, I want to come back to the definition because you give a great definition of misbelief and as a process. And I quote, you say it's a psychological mindset that acts as a distorted lens through which people view the world, reason about the world, and then describe the world to others. So it is a process, and it's not just a personal process.
That's right. And the thing I want to emphasize about the definition is usually we think about misbelief is about the value of the belief itself. And that's part of it. So I believe in something that is not true. That's one thing. But the second part is that become a central tendency in people and a lens from which they view other things.
And they want
So
to share it.
that's right. So if somebody, let's say, believes that wine is not healthy. Most people think that a little bit of wine is healthy. This person believes that wine is not healthy. That's fine. I wouldn't call it a misbelief. But if they adopt it as a central tendency in their life, and they say it's the wine industry that is creating this false narrative, and the health industry is supporting them, and so on, it becomes a lens from which they view everything else. Now it's a misbelief, and
So,
that's and what we see more and more is that these beliefs are becoming part of people's values in a very, very deep way.
hmm. So the book is divided basically. So we talk about this funnel of misbelief, which people fall in. So we have four chapters: emotional, cognitive, personality, and the social part.
Yeah.
Can you quickly walk us through the four chapters before we dive a little bit more deeply into each of them?
Yeah. So it's four components, right? Each of them has two
Yeah.
chapters, but it's four components. And the first component, the building block, the thing that without it people don't develop misbeliefs, is stress. And it's not stress that's saying, oh, I have so much email, I don't know how I'll manage to do all of it. It's stress saying, I don't understand how the world is working. I don't understand why I'm not doing so well. I'm not understanding what's going on. So that's the building block. And that's create the need to come up with a story. So that's important. That's the building block. The second component is cognitive. the way we process information.
Mm.
And there's lots of ways in which we process information in a suboptimal way. The third component is personality. Some people have an easier path to go down the path of, the funnel of misbelief. Some people have a harder time. And then the thing that seals the deal is the social component. And I use the term the funnel of misbelief to signal the notion that it does get more and more progressive. That when people start, we can still rescue them. But as they go down and down, if they get to the social component, then it's very hard to get them. And the thing about this funnel, it's almost all of psychology: stress, emotion, cognitive personality, social. And if we think about the cookie, the cookie is a weaponized food to get us to want one and then to eat more, right? It's a perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt to work on our senses and get us to crave them. The funnel of misbelief is almost like a weaponized system that is, I don't think it's designed for that. In the same way that I don't think anybody who designs cookies saying, "Oh, I want the obesity epidemic." I think that this has been designed to basically attack the weak points of almost all of our psychology.
Mhm.
It attacks us when we are the weakest and stress. It attacks our cognition. It attacks our personality. It attacks us in a social way. And as a consequence, it's very, very tempting to go down the funnel of misbelief.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say in general is that, the psychological approach is usually saying that when we see things in society, they're usually not for nothing. They're not random, right? Even if they're not desirable, they're not random. And misbeliefs are also like that. It's not as if somebody wakes up in the morning and say, "I want to believe that the earth is flat," or "I want to believe that the Illuminati are after me and they want to poison my kids." It's there's a real need. There's a real need that is answered by those misbeliefs. And it's answered by a wrong way. I wish it was answered by something else. But just because people go into misbelief, it doesn't mean that those people are less intelligent, interesting, caring, creative, and so on. It just means that they have a need, and the need is answered by in this very undesirable way for them and for society.
Yeah.
But it's a response to a real need, and that's the important one
Yeah,
of the
and I guess that was also the base for the study, because you were wondering why all these people were thinking these things. So let's start with the emotional part. And when we're talking about stress, so how do people go from stress to finding an explanation, a story, a villain, and it goes down to hate at the
yeah.
end? Is it a relatively fast process these days? Is it faster than it used to be with the world of social media and information traveling so quickly?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it can be much much faster. But um, let's start with kind of thinking a little bit about stress.
Hmm.
So imagine two tribes of fishermen. One tribe of fishermen is fishing in a lake, and one tribe of fishermen is fishing in the deep ocean. Which one have a less predictable outcome? The ones in the ocean. The ocean has storms and the fish move and so on. The lake is more predictable. Which one of those tribes is more likely to develop superstitions? The one in the ocean. Why? Because that unpredictable part makes us want to feel in control.
Hmm.
And a story and superstition and so on gives us a power of control. In the same way that people who are stressed, who are don't understand the world, are worried. Could be that people are worried about their health, the health of a loved one. They could be worried about their job. They could worry about war. They could worry about the pandemic. They're worried about something. They want a story. And not all stories are made equal. What stories are good? Stories about villains. Why are stories about villain are good? Because Now I have a reason, and it's not my fault. It's this other person's fault. They are
And
the ones who are
if
doing
there's a villain, there's a hero.
it. If it's a villain, there's blame. There's
Hmm.
blame. So, and we can deflect blame from us to somebody else. And the other interesting thing is that people also have a preference for complex stories. Why complex? Because if it's a simple story, I can't feel a lot of in control. But if society is looking down on me, or I feel society is looking down on me, I'm not doing very well, I'm not successful, and so on. If I find a story about the villain, and the story is complex, now I get to feel in control. Oh, you think I don't understand what's going on?
Hmm.
Let me tell you. It's really that story. So if you think about the story about the elders of Zion, right, the kind of a classic anti-Semitic text about a group of Jewish people who are getting together and controlling the world. That's a kind of story that says, it's not our fault.
Hmm.
Here is really what's going on. There is this cabal of people who are doing all of these terrible things, and it's a story with a villain, and it's a complex story. Now I feel in control and in the know.
Hmm.
Some
So the story is complex, but the explanation is simple. Oh, it's them, or it's him. But then there's a complex story underneath it.
That's right. And then the complex story has another component, which these days with social media, it allows for more updates,
Yeah.
right? Because every day, oh, there's a new thing that this villain is doing, and there's updates. If the story was simple, there wouldn't be enough places for it. So that's the beginning. That's the beginning, and we need to understand that when people find that story, they say, "Oh, the world makes sense." So there's a temporary relief. I didn't understand what was going on. I thought it was my fault.
Hmm.
Now I understand what is the real story. And then the other processes kick in:
Okay.
the cognitive, the personality,
Right.
and the social element.
I was wondering, as an expert on human behavior, when you experience this stress of being online with lies circulating about you, what was your coping mechanism? Did you already have something in place, or did it really take you by surprise?
So it took me very much by surprise. And I would say that in the beginning, it was just very, very tough. There's you know, death threats are never easy, and I didn't really believe somebody would come to kill me. But having sentences like "I'm building a guillotine to kill you," or "We're coming after you," um, there's something about it that stays with me. And there's a lot of research in psychology about cognitive load. And one of the findings is that, for example, people in poverty, part of their mental capacity is always dedicated to how will I manage the day? Will I be able to pay my bills? Will I be able to afford dinner, pay rent, and so on? And I knew that literature, but all of a sudden I understood it at a very different level.
Mhm.
Because I would say that for the first month, I felt that my thinking capacity was like 20% lower. It was incredible. I would try to focus on something, and I felt that part of my brain was
Yeah.
occupied all the time.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, something would come, and I would be worried. Like, is this email a new attack
Wow.
on me? Um, Nights were very, very tough. I had lots of nightmares. In the day, I could control some of my attention. At nights were very, very tough. Um, and this didn't strike me until I finished the book. But in some sense, this book is kind of my story. Like, if we say people need a story, they need a villain, and they need a complex story. This book this book is my attempt to find the villain. And the villain in my case is a combination of human nature and technology, right? The villain is this funnel of misbelief that has been created in all kinds of ways. And it's a complex story and so on. And you can look at this whole adventure is to try and find how this happened.
Yeah.
So I think that for me too, so my coping mechanism was to say, like, why am I attacked? Why am I attacked this way? Why can't I convince people? That level. And because of my training in social science, the place I went to was not to blame Bill Gates, but to try and understand
Yeah.
the social process. But I think it's a very similar drive. I just did it through social science rather than through research on YouTube.
Yeah.
And but I think that the drivers are quite
Yeah,
similar.
quite similar. I was wondering during the research, I don't know at what point you understood that this was kind of a coping mechanism, but doing all this research on misbelief, did you notice any misbeliefs of your own while researching? And if you did, were you able to readjust?
Yeah. So first of all, the question is, what did I understand that this was a coping mechanism? I
Well,
think a
I
little.
think, yeah, you said that came after writing the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the full understanding that I was doing exactly, this looking for a story came later. But I think as I was going through it, people around me would tell me, "Why are you diving into this? Let it be, let it
Mm.
go." And I couldn't. There was something very strong that propelled me to it, but I didn't fully understand it was a coping mechanism. I thought it was more of curiosity in the beginning. Um, in terms of my own misbeliefs, I found lots of things that I was, wrong about, um, in this process. Um, but I don't think I had a lot of misbeliefs, and I'll tell you why. I think that um, one of the things that is both a part of the cognitive process and the personality process is the question of whether people cannot commit to one position too strongly,
Mm.
right? So something becomes a misbelief when you believe it very strongly. It's a central tendency and you use it for the world. But if you don't believe it in 100%, but you're almost like you're 95% sure but not 100%, something cannot become a misbelief. And I think for scientists, that's what we're supposed to do
Yeah.
all the time. We're supposed to say, okay, this is our current theory of the world. This is the way we understand things now, but could change,
Yeah,
and we're
exactly.
not. There's a way in which it could get different, and we're not sure about it. And I think I have managed to adopt that perspective in a quite deep way into my life.
Mm.
So I don't have I've strong conviction that this is the best of what we know right now, and therefore we should move forward with that. But I don't necessarily say this is ultimately true.
Yeah.
So even when it comes to, um, let's say, take something that is ideology, question about what is the right level of distribution of wealth, or my belief that everybody should have access to healthcare, or even think about gender equality. There's some things I believe strongly about, but I would say that as somebody who thinks about science as an integral part of my life, I think with all of them I'm willing to accept the position that I might be wrong.
Yeah, so that kind of inoculates you
That's right.
against misbelief. So let's get to the cognitive part. I mean, even if we're already talking about it in many ways. So the more I read, the more I understood that, as you were saying, the best way not to fall into the funnel of misbelief is to continually doubt, even a little percentage, doubt what you are believing. Can you tell us a little bit about the Dunning-Kruger effect and the illusion of explanatory depth? So maybe
Yeah.
people will understand this concept a little bit better.
Yeah. So the cognitive components, they do lots of things.
Yeah.
They get us to watch Fox News or NBC. They get us to pay attention to Twitter or Instagram and to follow a few people and not others. They get us to ignore data we don't like. But one of the most interesting part is this issue of confidence. And one demonstration I did for the illusion of explanatory depth is with a flush toilet. I come to people, I say, do you understand how a flush toilet works? People say, yes. How much do you understand it on the scale? Almost perfect. Very good. Thankfully, we have all the pieces of a flush toilet here. Please assemble one. Almost nobody can assemble them. Actually, nobody could assemble them. And then we say, okay, so how much do you understand them? And people say, not so much. And if you think about this idea, this works for lots of things. You understand how a zipper works and how the elections work and how democracy works and how a lock works and how a virus works. And the idea is that almost everything we don't understand very much in depth. And the moment you try to attack people, hey, you don't understand things. Here's another piece of data. Here's another piece of data. We attack, people defend.
Okay.
Right? And they don't even listen. So attacking is usually not a good strategy. The illusion of explanatory depth basically means you come from people's perspective. I say, Jonathan, I'm not arguing with you. Not arguing with you. I just want to understand your position better. Help me understand this, how this works. Now, I'll give you kind of a very painful context. Of course, now with the terrible things happening in the south of Israel and in Gaza, I very thankfully I have friends or people I know from all over the world, including people from Arab worlds and Palestinians. And after October 7th, quite a few of them wanted to have discussions about this. And there's lots of ways to have discussions. You can discuss what's accurate in terms of history. We can discuss who is more wrong morally, and none of those are very helpful discussions. But the way I try to have these discussions, using kind of the principle of explanatory depth, is I say, I'm just listening to you. You tell me what you want. So one of them says that they want an immediate ceasefire. Fine. Let's say we have that. And I said, and then what? And they said, and now I want Israel to withdraw from Gaza. So, that would be fine. Let's say we do that. And I say, and now what? And they said, what do you mean? I said, this is just the beginning of the idea. You can't finish it then. I say, what do you do with the Hamas? I say, do you let them arm? I say, for example, do you give them permission to have nuclear weapons? And they said, no, of course not nuclear weapons. I said, okay, do you give them an air force? So once you start discussing this, all of a sudden they said, you know what? I don't know what's a good.
Is that also what you call paradoxical persuasion? It's kind of a
Yes,
mix of both.
that's right.
Yeah.
All of those approaches have a similarity in them, which is that the people have a confidence in their knowledge that is unjustified by the real knowledge, and because of that, their solutions are overly simplistic.
And what is the usual reaction people have when they realize that they don't know as much as they thought they knew?
So people usually, first of all, you have to do it in a non-attacking way, right? Because if people feel that they need to attack to protect themselves, nothing works. So it has to be authentic. You can't say, "Oh, I'm attacking you, but I'm pretending it's a."
Mm.
You have to say they have to believe that you're really interested in the real opinion. But what it does, it does put the safeguards down, and it gets people to start thinking about the real complexity. And this is particularly shocking to me with what's happening with American college students.
Yeah.
In principle, those are the people that every class they attend, they should finish that class feeling that the world is more complex than what they started. That's what university is supposed to do. It's supposed to say, "Oh, you thought things are simple. No, things have layers and layers, and they're more complex and more difficult, and there's more connections here, and there's economics, and there's psychology, and there's anthropology, and there are habits, and there's all of it is much more complex." And to see that college students end up saying, "Oh, life is really simple,"
Yeah.
it's incredibly shocking. So um, I think those approaches are very important. Those are very important.
Do you have an explanation for this? What's happening on the American campuses? I mean,
Yeah,
ideas of explanations?
yeah. So it's multifactored, but I think that the biggest thing is that um, what they're saying is really not about the Palestinians, and it's not about the Hamas. I think what they're saying is about identity. So if we fast forward to the social part, I mentioned this notion of shibolet, and shibolet comes from a story in the Bible that there was these two tribes who were fighting, and after the fight, they were walking around and they wanted to know if the people that they meet are from their tribe or from the other tribe. And these two tribes ended up using the word shibolet in a different way. One of them said shibolet, pronouncing it in a different way. One of them said shibolet, and one of them said sibolet. So I would meet you and I would say, "How do you pronounce this plant?" And if you said it in my way, I would say, "I'll give you a hug." And if you said it in the way of the other tribe, I would chase you away or try to kill you. But if you think about it, when I ask you what's the name of this plant, I'm not really asking you the names of the plants. I'm asking you for your identity. And that's how we use the term shibolet now, which is a speech that seems like it's about the fact, but it's actually about something very different. So, I haven't done this experiment, but my guess is that when you see undergrads in the US who are calling to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea, they're basically calling for the annihilation of Israel. Right? The river to the sea is all of Israel. Hamas claiming that they want the whole land back. That means we have to either kill everybody in Israel. I'm not saying all the Jews because 20% are Arabs. But they say we need to get rid of these 10 million
Mm.
people somehow. And I don't think any of them even understand. I think many of them don't know what they're saying or
Yeah,
don't
I'm
think
sure.
about it and so on. And they're saying it as an identity.
Yeah.
For me, listening to this, it says they are calling for the annihilation of Israel. It's a very painful statement. It's amazing to me that they do it. But I think for them, they're saying, "Look how liberal I am."
Mm.
But of course, it has downstream consequences because, as we know from cognitive dissonance, once people take an action, their preferences follow.
Mm.
So if you take a group of American college undergrads who, until a month ago, never heard of Gaza, don't have any idea about what's going on in the Middle East, but now they participate in protests to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea, protesting, signing documents, do all kinds of things, are going to change them.
Right. Plus, it's amplified. They're on social media. People talk about them.
That's right. And if people attack them and they have to defend themselves,
Exactly.
so I think this process that is starting with a declaration that they don't know what necessarily exactly what they're saying, but it's a declaration of identity, but then develops into posting in social media and finding like-minded people and
Hmm.
amplifying it and so on, will have a long-term effect.
And do you think this is a stage where if you were to talk to them, each of one of them individually, you could explain them to them, they have too much confidence, they don't really know? Or is this already the social part where it's harder to extricate people in a way?
I think that if we could get them to sit quietly without feeling that they need to defend themselves. I've seen, for example, lots of videos of people walking around campuses and tearing off pictures of kidnapped kids. Right. So there's lots of images of people who've been are hostages. There's about 240 people hostages, and people have pictures of them and say a few words about them and so on. And I see videos of people tearing those down.
Yeah.
Now, when somebody just tore these pictures down and you come and talk to them, I don't think they're in a mindset
Hmm.
of listening or talking or getting information. They just took an action, they feel attacked for it, and they will defend themselves. So I think that's a very bad setup for any kind
Right.
of opinion change. But um, I think that most people, if you set them down in a non-threatening environment and say, let's just figure out uh, where do we go forward. I think it will be like, talk about history. Who did what in 1948, or who had more right to the land in this, and is Jerusalem more holy for the Muslims
Hmm.
or for the Jewish people? All of those things I don't think are very useful debates, and I don't think I could get lots of understanding. But if we talk about the complexity of what's going on and start with that, and it is unbelievably complex,
Sure.
I think that is the pathway.
But it would take tremendous effort to
That's right.
talk to each and every one of these people, for sure.
That's right.
And so you kind of make the difference in the book between misbelievers and also on a bigger scale, foreign powers, those who use this corrosive information for political agendas, those who gain money, power from it.
Yeah.
So how do you think about these people who, as you were talking about the concept of shibboleth, so they sometimes really don't know, they don't think, they don't believe what they're saying, but just gain something from thousands, tens
Yeah.
of thousands of people believing this. So,
Yeah. So there's quite a few companies who monitor the internet and can tell you what is happening on the internet uh, with real people and what's happening with real people plus bots.
hmm,
And it's a very, very different world. So there's kind of two very big forces. One is bots, and the second one is the creation of intentional, um, deceptive,
yeah,
deceptive information. So, on the creation of the deceptive information, if you think about the video that was created about me, that one I described, and then there are many others, but there's a video, by the way, there's a new video now describing some of the atrocities of October 7th and asking the question of whether I'm involved.
really,
Whether this is
it's
it's
crazy.
not Israel versus Hamas, but it's a cabal that created that, and they have a theory about how it could happen. Now, those things, I don't think it's a foreign power. I
Hmm.
think by now there's some conspiracy theorists who are they think that they're talking the truth.
Okay.
Right? They say, I'm linking all of these points in a way that is actually correct, and they think they're sharing information. So I think there's some of that, but I think that there are very few big debates happening on social media without interventions from foreign powers. There's certainly very few that are not bot related. I can tell you that I am very much attacked by many bots.
So how does that work? Can you explain? A bot is it's not controlled by someone. Just
a bot. So there are bots that are, let's say, from country X, let's say Iran, and they basically say, look, let's monitor the US, let's monitor Israel, let's monitor this. And every time we see some heated debate, let's make it worse.
Okay.
You basically say, what I want people to fight internally. Like, I want people to fight internally on abortion rights. And I want people to fight internally about whether the government, carrying weapons, and everything you find that people are fighting about, you say, hey, it would be better if people had bigger fights within them. And if you think about countries trying to create damage for another country, basically having people fight within the country is probably the cheapest way to create havoc and creating misbelief. So the book ends. So we have these components of misbelief, and then the book ends with the cost to society in terms of trust. But it says when people stop believing, mistrust is becoming larger, and then lots of things are lost for society. So foreign powers are interested in also reducing trust. So if you look at the US, and you say in the last election season, there was a lot of people who thought that Trump actually won the election and the elections were stolen. That level of unease in the country is very bad for the US and very bad for somebody who wants the US to have less trust. Getting and this next election is going to start from where the last one left. So, if people don't trust the government, if people don't trust the results of the elections, what happens to paying taxes, obeying the rules?
Right.
Lots of other things could change. So there are certainly a lot of bad actors out there, and they both produce disinformation and they also spread it, and then they try to create internal fighting.
Yeah, kind of scary. So we have a few minutes left, so I wanted to talk about some of the ideas for solutions. You talk about some of the ideas, and it's I was a little surprised because it's based mainly on tech, what the technology can do for us to, like you take the example of cars and driving, and that engineers built seat belts and everything to keep us safe. So, are you aware of any technology out there that can try to keep us safe? And also on the personal level, do you use any kind of technology to like limit your access to information? Can you tell us a little bit?
So first of all, when we think about what to do, I think there's solutions that we as individuals can try, and there are things that society needs to do, even the regulation needs to. On the individual side, I think that if we think about stress as the building block, the first thing to do is to try and build resilience. Right? And resilience means that we have this social network and we provide it for other people, we provide it for ourselves. I think government need to think about stress as a national treasure or the natural resource, right? The stress level is something that countries need to pay attention to, and when stress increases, there's things that countries can do, including explain to us what is going on. There are things like we talked about, like the illusion of explanatory depth and paradoxical persuasion, and how do you talk to people. There are things like basically saying, let's keep multiple hypotheses in mind. It's called intellectual humility, but I think schools need to teach this, and we need to train ourselves to enjoy that. But the segregation of society based on news outlets and what is happening in social media, and the fact that the currency is like, all of those are very, very unhealthy. They're very, very unhealthy. The Arab Spring was not too long ago. And when the Arab Spring happened, we all thought that social media networks are going to bring a new era of democracy. Right? We thought that information should be free and everybody would be better off. And we had all of these optimistic thoughts about information. We didn't understand algorithms. We didn't understand misinformation. We didn't understand people with bad intentions and the fact that they could have such. We didn't understand the liking economy. This video I described about me, it's as a story, it's a beautiful story. It's a 90-second story of the creation of a villain. Injury, hating people. Like, tell me a good story in 90 seconds that will be as appealing as this one. So, it's a clickbait.
And share bait.
And once people share it, are they sharing it because they believe it? Because it's amusing? Because they think it's ridiculous? We don't know. It's a very impoverished language. So at the end of the day, we do need to understand that the negative effects of social media, and we need to figure out how much we're willing to fight it. But I think the first step is to really understand how bad it is for us. So I don't think I don't want people to think that that's the only solution, and until it's done, there's nothing to do. Yes, we can do things personally. Now, I'll tell you what I do. So first of all, I do limit my media consumption. I do try to not read social media for news. I do have a few news resources that I think are worth trusting. Now, do they make mistakes? Yes, from time to time they make mistakes as well, but in general they make less mistakes. I almost don't share anything until I'm very sure it's worth sharing. I think sharing. I don't share things that I find curious. I share things that I think are very, very likely to be true. So I worry a lot about. I don't want to become a portal for sharing misinformation. And then when something is strange, I actually do the research. So it's not I don't do experiments about it, but I do check the resources. I see where it's coming from and so on. This has been an unbelievable lesson in this time of looking at misinformation, because sometimes one of the misbelievers would send me to some website that looked like an academic outlet. It looked like a journal of something in medicine. And you look at the papers, and some of them look like they're real papers. And then the more you look, you say, oh, not so much. It's actually funded by this entity that is
It must have heightened your mistrust in a way to another degree.
That's right. And it's a very I'm inherently a very trusting person, and the lens of worrying about the amount of fake information out there online is it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I want to go to my physician and believe them. I want to listen to people on television and believe them. I want to go to our politicians and believe them. I and the reduction of this belief, first of all, it's very costly,
Yeah,
because
it's
now
tiring.
it's exactly, it means a lot more work on anything. But there's also sadness. There's also sadness in it. A few days ago, I was trying to help a group who was trying to fight misinformation. And they showed me all kinds of things that I was not exposed. And at the end of that conversation, I was my whole body was shaking.
Right.
There's something for me so terrible in taking advantage of the inherent trust that people have. We are wired to trust. We are wired to trust other people. It's a beautiful thing about human nature that we're wired to trust. It has interesting reasons in our evolutionary history, but we're wired to trust, and there are people who are purposefully taking advantage of that, and it's just such a terrible thing. It's such a terrible thing that the people with really bad intentions who are taking advantage of these beautiful human characteristic. And so I was just felt like that there is, it's like it's one of the ways that evil is winning and having a big impact. Um, Actually, I went I went to take a shower after that. And then I listened to some music. I just couldn't calm down on some of the things that I've seen.
And this is from someone who studied dishonesty
Yeah,
and irrationality, so I imagine for other people. So what should be takeaway message in a way, maybe a more positive, more hopeful message from all of this?
yeah. So I think if I think so, I think that this is not the last chapter. If I thought that this is the state of the world and that's the end, it's quite depressing.
Yeah.
Um, I think there are going to be better chapters, but I think the first step is to understand how devastating misbelief can be to us individually, to the people we know, to society, and then we need to figure out what are we going to do. What are we going to do in the way that we're going to deal with information? Our kids are dealing with information. How are we going to get to a new understanding of what's going on in the world? What are we going to ask our politicians to do? How are we going to regulate information online? But the reason to talk about texting and driving and so on is to say, we don't need to accept human failing. Well, we have lots of human failing, and then we figure it out and we try to protect ourselves from it. This is a very, very important case. 10 years ago, if you asked me what are the big challenges for society, misbelief would not be one. If you ask me what it is now, it's one of them. But we need to, all of us, understand how big this issue is and try to fight it.
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I have many other questions, but that's all the time we have for today. So thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you would like to hear more like this, don't forget to like and spread the word if you want. So you can find everything about this podcast and my activities as a writer on my website, hamiljonathan.com. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon on the Creators Podcast.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.